Kerry. What a great day it is today. Market's up. Bitcoin's down.
Hey, well, my initial call on Bitcoin was it was going down to 3880 in that range. It's hard to know what Bitcoin's peak really was. I've seen 19,100 and change. I've seen 19,400 and change, and I've seen 19,700 and change. So I don't know what its peak was, but just taking the 19,400, which is nicely, conveniently in the middle, if I take 80% off of that, I come to around $3,880, the Bitcoin.
Impossible, sir. Impossible.
Is it impossible?
Are you telling me Bitcoin did not hit $200,000 like Tim Draper, the investment guru, said it would?
I thought it was hitting $1 million, man. I thought it was going to infinity. And, hey, I sold mine out right when I told you to sell it. So where is Bitcoin today, Andrew? It's at $2,600.51. I shouldn't say today. Right at this moment, because, Bitcoin trades like nothing else. And this is the bottom here. But
what?
I'm going to tell you, it's the bottom, but I'm going to tell you my prediction is that within 3 years, none of the existing kleptocurrencies that exist right now are going to exist. They're all going to be gone. And to find out why they'll be gone, you're going to have to read my next newsletter, because I make a very compelling case as to why it's going to cease to exist. Tell us your prediction here, since you're the Moneyball economics guy, and I'm lining up for a fastball right down the plate here, Andrew.
So many things to throw in here. Okay, first of all, Bitcoin failed. Bitcoin was supposed to be that safe haven alternative to gold. And what's happened in the market crashing over the past few months? Oh, it crashed. And it crashed harder than any other asset. So as a safe haven, gold and silver were pretty strong.
We're pretty safe, huh? You went down
Bitcoin,
20%.
Total failure. So let's roll back a year or even more. But let's talk about what is cryptocurrency. What was the theory? The idea was pretty solid. The Federal Reserve, we're already a digital economy.
Wait. Whoa. I got to take one issue with you. The idea was not solid. It was a pipe dream, but go on from there. Okay.
I'm going to let you have that one. I'm going to differentiate between Bitcoin and the other variations of the theme. The idea, though, was, the dollar's being messed with by the Fed and central banks. Let's just accept, instead of getting our toes wet in the idea of a digital currency, let's just go surfs up. Let's come up with something that's different from the dollar in the sense that you cannot erode the value simply by printing more. There's a limited amount. In theory, that's the theory behind gold. There's a limited amount and a little bit more emerges every year, but it's limited. Okay. That makes sense up to a point. What it really was, though, was a vehicle for people getting their money to places and away from places. Mm-hmm. That's key. Now, early on, Bitcoin was basically a smuggler's delight. The Chinese then discovered and go, oh, my God, this is better than any other vehicle for getting our money out of China. Big capital outflows happened, and China started playing whack-a-mole to prevent capital outflow. They started going after Bitcoin, so Bitcoin started bouncing. When Bitcoin finally hit their prime, I would say early 2017, it's about almost 2 years ago, everyone started getting excited, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, and it just started gathering steam. I mean, like you said, it almost hit $20,000, but you could see the hot money flowing into it. Nobody knew what was going on. And then you had Ethereum and all these other variations of the theme. But bottom line, the idea was we've created something that has a limited amount of availability, and so therefore the value of it should be inflation-proof and all other external shock-proof. Right? Now, what's interesting is you put your date 3 days before the end of the year. What's interesting is if you really looked at it, let's go systematic. That's when you could start shorting this thing.
I know.
All of a sudden, as soon as you could short it, what do you think the smart money started to do? They started to short it.
But that's not the reason why. Okay.
The reason why it was Dutch tulip bulb time.
Hey, and I actually gave a presentation in Hawaii at our good friend Jason Hartman's conference, and I traced the evolution of the bubble. from tulip mania. It's really, bubbles have happened. They're as old as humanity. But the modern bubble, which started in Holland in the 1600s and followed it up to now. The interesting thing is, like, you see a chart formation of bubbles happen, and you just know. And then the interesting thing is... Oh, no, sir,
according to the powers that be, you cannot predict bubbles. What are you talking about?
I totally predicted this after being burned by gold, which gold is not a traditional bubble. Gold is just an inflated market back in 2011, got ahead of itself. But gold wasn't a traditional bubble. You have to distinguish between the two. Right now, real estate has really run up. It's not a bubble within the definition of a conventional bubble, which I would say something that goes up many times its initial value with on the heels of excessive speculation and optimism, and inevitably comes back to earth almost to where it started from. Okay, so the stock market now, Andrew, is not a bubble. Like, we'd like to call it a bubble, but I think we do ourselves a disservice by calling these things bubbles, because then it makes them harder to understand exactly what's happening. And, you know, they're not bubbles. Real estate right now is not a bubble. Yeah, it's gone up 3-4 times. Stock market was up 4 or 5 times where it departed from the bottom of the crisis, but they're not bubbles in the conventional term. People will take issue. They can still be overvalued, right? Right? But that doesn't make it a bubble just because it's overvalued.
Bitcoin bubble. No, let's. That
was a bubble in the classic. In the classic.
But here's where I want to diverge from your prediction just a little.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say 2 things. I'm going to say Bitcoin's not going away, but it's a question of price. And I'll tell you why I don't think it's going away.
You're going to have to read my article. I'm not going to tell you what's in it, but when you read it, you will understand why it will cease to exist. Okay.
Let me throw out my prediction, and we'll jump to another topic. My prediction is I think China, I think Russia are 2 countries which are really interested in de-dollarization, or at the very least, you know, nipping at the heels of the dollar strength, and having an alternative currency that is used globally sort of benefits that agenda. So that's why I don't think it'll go away. I think Russia will allow it. I also think, you know, when you put on your hat of living in a third world country, you know, these are places where liquidity are issues, where simple banking is still a problem. And that's why, for example, gold is still tradable.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that at the end of the day, it's just a lot easier to get a pound of, which is easier, a pound of gold smuggled out or a simple SIM card.
Yeah, well,
so
I think
there'll be pockets where it will continue. But come on. I honestly think it's got to go below 2, possibly 1,000.
Listen to what I said, though. I said that all of these current crop of cryptocurrencies, kleptocurrencies, will actually cease to exist. That's not to say that future cryptos won't be safe. I think they will. There is a fundamental flaw in all of this open source money that is going to lead to its demise. That's what I'm saying here. And the only other point I want to make, Andrew, is what is the greatest power that a government has over its country, its people, its everything? And that is, the greatest sovereign power is the ability to coin money, as they called it in the Constitution. So if you think that a bunch of renegade upstarts are going to take away the United States or the ECB or the Bank of China's ability to issue as much of this fiat-based garbage that they can make their keyboards, keep adding zeros to the currency, you think they're going to allow these upstart open source money people to beat them? No.
Let me address that, because
Not
I've actually
going to happen.
Had some interesting dialogues with folks at banks, and Bitcoin is wrapped around a technology. Crypto is wrapped around a technology called blockchain.
Correct.
And this is what gets everyone interested when you are an incumbent. So last year, when Bitcoin was surging, a lot of things started to happen in the fundamental reality. Some people took a flyer. You're a portfolio manager. Maybe you bought 50,000 of Bitcoin. All of a sudden, it's now worth, I don't know, throw a number out there, $500,000, a little bit more. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, you have to take certain actions to secure this asset. It's like a stock, and there are certain rules and regulations about securing it. All of a sudden, it became real. It became legitimate in certain ways, and banks started to pay attention. Remember last year, Jamie Dimon going, "Oh, this is who cares?" J.P. Morgan.
Did you say
we'll never do it.
Did you say Jamie Dimon? Did I hear you say that right?
Exactly. Going forward, though, what happened was everyone sat up and took notice, and what they saw was one element that caught their attention. Remember, the Federal Reserve was founded for a variety of reasons, but one was simple. It was a trusted third party. You had a bank in California, you had a bank in New York, and someone wanted to write a check. There had to be a clearinghouse. And so the Federal Reserve acted as that clearinghouse. Fast forward to today, and that need for clearinghouses kind of shrunk a lot. But that's what the Fed still does. They insert themselves in the middle. The cool part about all these various cryptocurrencies was it was decentralized. You didn't need that clearinghouse. Now, if you're a bank like JP Morgan or any other bank like a Chase, you suddenly go, wait a second. I've got all these rules and regulations that require me to document every single transaction like you wouldn't believe. Using blockchain technology, I can do that, and it's a fraction of the cost, and it's faster. Wait a second. Now we're talking. So a lot of these banks are sort of stripping out that technology and are looking to use it. They're not so much looking at crypto. Crypto was more of they had some customers who had $1 million or $2 million and were asking what to do and took a few flyers on it. But blockchain, out of this whole mess will come some interesting new technologies that do somewhat erode the position of the Fed and say, why are you here? Why do you exist? We no longer need a clearinghouse. We, the banks, have a decentralized solution for this that is accepted and that's stable. So Federal Reserve, what is your role in the economy? And you just put your finger on it, which is owning the money supply. Totally different, though. But it's interesting because you have this organic need for the Fed that had a legitimate starting point that then quickly evolved into something else.
Yeah, well,
and we're going back to basics.
Bitcoin is toast. The rest of them are toast. They're going to go down to nothing. And I'm making the call cards. Now. Get rid of them. Buy gold, buy silver, put them into dollars. I don't care what.
You're saying it's the 21st century equivalent of baseball cards. It had its time, and it's come and gone.
Yeah. Well, hey.
You can collect it if you want it.
Wait, I'll still take that 1903 Honus Wagner if you're going to give it to me. It might not be a currency, but I certainly can trade it for it.
Would you take a video copy of it?
Hey, I'll take a video copy, but I won't give you any money for it. So
give me some Bitcoin.
Hey, so the next conflagration's about to break out in the People's Republic of California. Am I correct?
Oh, we have problems. And not only do you have problems that no one's noticing. So you have, again, a perfect storm gathering, and everyone is sitting outside thinking about going for a barbecue, and they should be huddling up a little bit. So it all starts with the usual basics of people living beyond their means, shall we say. So I'll focus on the Bay Area where I live, San Francisco. Incredibly expensive. I go to New York. It's cheaper to have a steak dinner in New York than it is in San Francisco, just to put it out there.
That is really pathetic, I got to tell you, because
that's how expensive
I love
it is.
Steak. And,
gotta love steak.
Go to Peter Luger's, which is arguably the best steakhouse in New York, even though it's in Brooklyn, but we won't hold that against it too badly. $50 buys you about the best steak that you're ever going to have anywhere on the planet. So to hear that San Francisco could be more than that is kind of shocking, because I'm sure the steak isn't as good.
I'm not, and by the way, that's not bragging rights to say that you're the most expensive city in town. It just is a very expensive part of the world, and a lot of that is real estate driven, and a lot of it's other reasons. But here's the problem. let's start off with just home ownership. To own a home today, you really depend on a couple of things. And I don't mean affordability. I don't want to talk about, the affordability issue. Let's focus on just California's core problem going forward. California has both income taxes and sales taxes. In the Bay Area, income taxes, California's around 10% income tax.
11 point something if you're a high earner. But yeah.
And sales tax is 10% too. So this is, the California state tax base is driven by consumers. A lot. And there's a limit on what they can do on real estate. The real estate tax is pretty nominal. They capped it at 2% because they saw politicians constantly going after homeowners, and so it's capped. In other words, if California wants to expand its tax revenues, it has only two choices: more spending or raise the rate. It's one or the other. Mm-hmm. So here's the problem that Trump put into the laps of Jerry Brown and team. So last year with the Trump tax, or rather I should say this year with the Trump tax, a couple of changes were made. And those changes directly affect the people who live on the coasts, New York, Connecticut, California, because these states really depend on a couple of things, especially the state and local tax write-off. So again, you bought a home. You're probably paying out here a 1,000 square foot shack will cost you $1 million just to start. Okay.
And that's before you have to knock it down. Before you have to knock it down and put a decent house up there.
Whatever home improvements you want to do.
It'll be condemned.
This is an expensive place to be.
That'll be condemned. That 1,000-foot shack, probably the city will condemn it, and you'll have to build a new place in its stead. But anyway, $1 million is nothing. Let's say you
own one. Let's say you got smart. Anyway, you own one, and the tax assessor says that's great, and now it's $20,000 a year in property taxes, and you say that's fine because I write it off my federal taxes. Sorry, Charlie, Trump has capped you. You're not going to be able to write that off anymore. In fact, the limit, I believe, is about $10,000. So overnight, homeowners now sit there and say, wait a second, I have to now come up with $10,000 gap. I'm no longer able to get this off the back end on my federal taxes. And the answer is that's correct. Now, that's not the only pain point, but let's just stick with that. If you're a homeowner, you now have to come up with $10,000 after taxes, which, do the math, that's about $15,000, $16,000 before taxes. So, again, the average salary out here, about $100,000 something. Doesn't matter. You just took a big hit to your income, a big hit. And guess what? That $15,000, $16,000 before taxes, $10,000 after taxes is money you won't be spending. So that means the California economy, 10%. You used to spend $10,000 a year out of your paycheck, and California would say, well, that's great. I get out of that $10,000 spend about $1,000. Again, rough numbers. I'm doing really rough numbers. California no longer gets about $1,000 per household because people aren't going to spend that $10,000 plus. So now every household in California is spending $1,000 less, or rather, the tax man gets $1,000 less per household. That's a lot. How is California going to make up for that?
Deflationary. What you're saying is it's deflationary for California because it's taking that money right out of the economy and sending it to beautiful Washington, D.C., where they have so many useful things to do with your money and creative things. And isn't it a wonderful country?
What I'm saying is California is now staring down a very problematic barrel of a gun, which is they're going to have a massive budget shortfall. And here's why. The reality hits home in April when we pay taxes. But the California state, like most states, their fiscal year ends at the end of June. So very quickly, they're going to realize, we have a budget problem. And California, being California, is going to be interested in raising taxes, but they're not going to be able to. So you're going to start to see that wave of guns or butter. Do we raise taxes? Do we try to? This year, they raised taxes or tried to, and a lot of people started to push back and say, wait, we're one of the highest tax areas. What are we getting for our money? And the answers were not very good.
I think there's a Yiddish word for it that my I'm sorry, this is kind of funny, but my grandmother would say, and that word is bupkis, which means beans.
They're going to be verklempt about this. But it gets even worse because now you talk about, people who are here, you have millennials, suddenly they're struggling more. And by the way, home ownership gets pushed out even further because of this recent market crash. A lot of the Facebook people who are hoping to use that stock that they have, oops, that's down a lot. And so you've got a couple of other winds that are blowing in that are headwinds. California's in trouble next year. And California, it's interesting because I talk to people about this and they have no idea the Trump tax hit. They have no idea. And I'll sit there and say, you do know that you aren't going to get the write-off next year as big as you had this year. And they look at me like I'm smoking crack. Mm-hmm. And I said, what would happen to you if you had to pay another $10,000 in taxes? And there's that look of panic. Why? Because out here, you said there's no such thing as a bubble, but real estate has certainly gotten to a point of being that one thing that people buy and they overstretch, they overleverage. They do whatever they can to buy as much as they can. Now, assuming that they've done that, they're in trouble. $10,000 for an engineer who's making $150,000 is not the end of the world. Mm-hmm. But if you're already stretched, it is a problem. You have to cut back. You have no choice. And then you push back on your company and say, I need a 10% raise. And the company is suddenly going to say, no, I can't help you make up the difference. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in California next year because it is not going to be pretty. And the response will be, as usual, ugly because politicians versus taxpayers.
Yeah, definitely. And couldn't happen to a better state. They deserve it. They've been profligate in their spending. They've been reckless. They've been irresponsible. They've been just the exact way that Jerry Brown has run his entire political career. That's the way he's run your state into the ground. You deserve it for electing these horrible politicians, and now his heir apparent is coming on board to really screw things up. I'm talking about Mr. Gavin Newsom.
Oh, come on, man. Think of the children.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the children, and I'm thinking of the children of illegal aliens and weaponized immigration and voter fraud. And all of these things that California really stands for. So isn't it great? Anyways, it's doomed. The state is going to have to change its evil ways, and there's no getting around it. It's going to have to do it, and it's going to be brought kicking and screaming. The people are already flooding out of your state there, Andrew. They're leaving in droves.
Oh, yeah.
They're voting with their feet.
I was staying with my in-laws in Portland. Great house, fantastic house. And I said, so, let's talk. And what does property go for? Wonderful development, just right outside Portland. So you have easy access to downtown when you want it. And I love Portland as a city. Mm-hmm. They were like, oh, this is really expensive. This is an $800,000 house. And I started laughing. I mean, we're talking about almost 4,000 square feet, 3-car garage, very, less than 20-year-old piece of property. And I think it's $800,000. Wow, you could practically get a one-bedroom townhouse for that down where I am.
Wow.
Yeah. So no wonder
this is what it was.
No wonder, right? People will go where the quality of life is better. But right now, I mean, this is there's a lot of hot money flowing around the Bay Area. People are willing to roll the dice and see what they can do. But this is not a millennial. It's like a New York. You don't really want to live here. You want to get rich here and move somewhere more pleasant. So everyone in New York lives in Connecticut. You don't raise your family in New York. You raise it outside.
Well, some do, but many don't. That's for sure.
And so, you're. I do believe, though, you will continue to see metro areas pick up. It's been the history of the U.S. where we've had this shift from the farms to the cities, and it continues.
Yeah.
But I do think that not every city has to be the destination. San Francisco right now has a headlock on the high-tech destination. That'll probably shift a little bit to New York with Amazon, AWS. But, at the end of the day, not everyone's moving to Des Moines.
Yeah. Yeah, well, hey. Don't you knock the Midwest. There's a lot of people in the Midwest, and they've got values. unlike the coasts, which seem to have no values whatsoever. It's going to be dramatic. It's going to be devastating. It's really going to be a problem from the state, and you don't have the leadership to deal with it. In fact, you have no leadership. You just have this orgy of give them whatever they want. Anyway, we kind of run out of time.